Hey studs, and welcome to Studson Studio. Today let's make this double-decker Among Us book nook featuring a murder in electrical and some innocent red crewmate trapped in the vent below. Wait, that's weird. Hey, can someone go fix that? Never mind, I got it. Should be pretty easy though, just gotta flip a couple switches. Okay, crewmates, we're stacked on tasks today, and each of you will have an important role in making today's craft, and more specifically, not murdering. I'll start. We're going to start with priming the shields, and by shields, that means we'll be making the protective box that will house the book nook. These two clipboards cost me $2 at the dollar store, and after aggressively removing the clip, I'm left with damaged but cost-effective MDF boards. This book nook is technically a game nook because I don't read books, I only read YouTube comments. Consider leaving one. These are all the pieces we'll need for our box. Write these measurements down in your copybook now. I'm gluing together 4 out of the 5 walls using tacky glue or your preferred wood glue, but I'm only gently placing the 5th wall in place with a heavy weight on top to keep the glue seams nice and tight. Oh, thank you, Red. Okay, box exoskeleton is done, but for the endoskeleton, I'm building some I-beams using strips of medium-weight chipboard. This is a nifty technique I picked up from Eric's Hobby Workshop, a great source of craft inspiration that goes far deeper than just beams. I only needed 1 beam for this, but big brainers build bunches for bountiful builds. With some extra chipboard, I'm chopping out a floor and then adding a bunch of faux metal panels with recycled cardstock from some random packaging. You can tell it's spaceship paneling from the future because I cut off the 90-degree angled corners of each piece. Here I'm encrusting my finger in rhinestones and making a mess all over the floor. These gems make excellent rivets, and also this cubic zirconia encrusted beam is now worth $1,400. This is what will eventually be the vent floor, which I'll paint space colors later. There are many benefits to eating tofu. Chief amongst them is the texture on its plastic shell. The design on these pieces makes a pretty good wall texture for the vents. The vent also needs a ladder, which we'll add in the latter part of the build. I picked up these hair rollers at the dollar store. Each roller is secretly a bundle of 8 miniature ladders, giving it a unit price of 3 cents. Using an old shampoo cap and a piece of cross-stitch canvas, I'm making an air intake duct for the back of the vent. It sucks. If you've ever bought a printer, sometimes they come with these little pieces of junk plastic that have cool sci-fi angles to them. I thought this looked like a door frame, and so it was. And for the upper floor, I spent 100 hours cutting out this metal frame from chipboard, then layered in some cross-stitch canvas, aka
person plastic,
for a nice industrial floor in electrical. And then I'm adding a couple of risers for the electrical panels to hide where all the murder happens. Next step is to transform all of this cardboard and plastic into a grungy metal texture using watered down modeling paste mixed with a little bit of baking soda for extra grittiness. I'm aiming for a consistency of diet gruel. I'm using a brush to spread it, but to ward off evil brush strokes, dab the goop soup with a paper towel. The better reason we're creaming up everything is to add texture for paint adhesion. Cardboard is a paint sponge and smooth plastic hates paint, but goop soup, once dried, is a perfect canvas for paint. After it's dry and crispy, it's prime time. I primed in black as a mistake, then did gray because the actual paint we're going to use later will be much lighter shades, and gray will make a much better undercoat. Okay, on to task 2. Next we're assembling the artifact using this junk box. Oh, thank you, Cyan. By artifact, I mean the 2 electrical panels that sit in electrical. We'll need some scrap cardstock as well for this. Oh, thank you, Cyan. I also need my Olfa knife. Oh, thank you, Cyan. Such a friend. Could you also grab this button for me? Hey y'all, pretty classic move here. Cyan is clearly trying to marinate me. Vote him out, please. Maybe it wasn't Cyan.
Nobody trusts anybody now.
Hello, Poppy.
This piece of Swiss cheese will eventually be a light panel once I mount some LEDs behind it, and another piece of cardstock for the fixed lights door in front of Killstack Mountain. Anytime I need a door hinge, I've been slowly chopping off pieces of this chain necklace. The leftovers are almost bracelet-sized, or necklace-sized if you have a micro neck. And here's some more jewelry. I'm using an earring back for the cabinet door handle. Here I'm adding a heat vent to the side of the electrical panel using a piece of this mesh from a strainer I got at the dollar store. These panels are now fully accessorized, so I'm whipping up a batch of old-fashioned sealing sauce. I'm using the most garbage brush I have to splotch it all around, carefully trying to avoid leaving any brush strokes. I'm paying particular attention to any edges or seams along doors. Next up, let's fuel the engines, and by fuel I mean paint of course. This task metaphor is not breaking down at all. Pink, can you hand me some of that paint over there? I'm looking for the browns and the blues. Pink, hello? Okay team, Pink was just sort of standing there spacing out. Pretty sure they were faking tasks. Vote Pink. If you would have asked me what color electrical was without looking up reference, I would have misremembered the whole ship as, I don't know, gray, like a silverish spaceship color. But luckily accuracy is maybe like 40% important to me, so we're going with a couple blues for the vent room and a delicious toffee and a comfortable khaki for electrical. I also decided to go for a light blue for the electrical panels, even though my eyeballs tell me it's metal, so it's gray. All of these colors are looking a bit too bright and solid right now, but I'm going to go back in later with a grungy dark wash because factory fresh colors are a sin. I got a printer recently, which is very exciting because it's a better painter than I am. I had it paint out a bunch of these tiny electrical panel icons that I found on my local Google. This is kind of a nifty trick for making decals. If you soak them in some sort of sticky wet, in this case watered down Mod Podge or glue, you can stick them down to flat areas and suddenly make everything look a lot more impressive than it actually is. Because more details to distract the eye equals more artistic talent, that's the law. If you soak them too much and get them so wet, you can always use a cotton swab to dab off all the extra wetness. Not bad, time to get back on task with a couple other task decals. Now let's quickly tear up the box with the biggest drill bit I have. Later I'll use this hole to stick through some LEDs to illuminate the vent floor from the back. I'm also doing the same to this wall, which is made of a thin, delicate plastic.
I can't believe you've done this.
I was a fool to wield such torque against this delicate butterfly wing. It actually didn't do too much damage in the end. I'll just chalk up this mishap as free weathering. Before we add a layer of filth with a nice dirty wash, we need to glaze these hams to seal in the decals and seal up the paint so it doesn't run once we put the wash over it.
Nice hat.
Oof, it looks way too wet and at the moment, but this is all just temporary. Let's make it even shinier with 2 times more shine. I'm using some Pledge Floor Care mixed with some black acrylic paint to make a homemade black wash. This actually won't make everything more shiny, but it will give all the surfaces a nice grimy tint. I've used this floor care as a varnish before, but never as a wash, but I really like it actually. It already has kind of a soapy nature to it, which helps it flow into all the cracks. Plus, when it dries, it has a nice hard finish. Washes tend to dry a bit lighter than how they look when they're wet, but I'm still dabbing off most of it to give it a more random pattern once it's dried. The only places I don't mind a little dirt are the corners and the recesses. I like my edges greasy. Then I went back in with some lighter shades and hit up the edges with some dry brushing. Basically just want to get all those edges to pop again. You want to get the brush almost bone dry and just use the lightest baby's breath of paint. My beautiful diamond rivets are now hidden deep in a blue sea of paint, but we need to reverse that by going back over all of the rivet lumps with a shiny silver. Then I'm using a ragged sponge blob to splotch on a silver paint chipping effect using the same silver acrylic paint as the rivets. Mostly I'm aiming for the edges and raised areas, because that's most likely where a space bean would scuff their boots when they're running from an imposter. Cool, painting and weathering is done, so let's assemble everything. Here's a piece of red plastic for behind the Swiss cheese panel. Next it's time to fix the lights. White, it's your turn not to act sus. Recently, Blackmagic Craft inspired me with his recent D&D book Nook where he used some of these fairy lights as a lighting source within the box. I also have this red cap from a propane can which will make a nice filter for the vent light. Hey, can I see that real quick? You know what this cap kinda looks like? Hey y'all, no new info. I just want to speedrun this. Let's dump white. I'm using 2 strands of these LED fairy lights and strategically weaving the wire through hidden holes in such a way that the mess won't be seen when it's powered on. I'm actually impressed with how bright these things are, even though they're powered by one of those tiny worthless coin-sized batteries.
My little heart's no bigger than a quarter.
So if we're lucky, we might get to enjoy illumination for an hour. This tube is from an old shampoo pump bottle. I'm using it as a diffuser over the LEDs to soften up the light source a bit. My eventual plan is to replace the batteries with a 3-volt AC adapter and solder the wires for unlimited power. Please take note of my flawless wiring diagram here. There are many secret messes all around, but as the old rhyme goes, say it with me, If it's going to be hidden by another bit, then it's okay if it looks like bad. I'm mounting the two switches on the back side of the box that will never be seen, and then finishing up with the ceiling lights, which was originally a 30-inch strand that I crumpled into this mess, but I have just the thing to hide the mess. It's this clear but foggy looking cutting mat from the dollar store. I'm gluing a strip over the lights, then covering it with a couple ladder pieces from the hair rollers from earlier. Next task, fix the wiring. I got a bunch of these colored earbuds from the dollar store, which should look pretty accurate as wires because they are all made of wires. Having trouble there, Lime? Lime did crimes, vote Lime. Quick audio hack. Step 1, snip off these wires, and final step, can't hear you, I have my AirPods in. I bundled up a bunch of various colored wires using rubber bands and connected them to the ceiling using super glue, and then some to the top of the electrical cabinet, and then a bundle to the front of their server to hack all their files.
I'm gonna get some extreme downloads tonight.
That was the final task for the book nook, which means we're ready to glue on the final side and close up the box, then seal the whole box in professional black poster board from the dollar store. I didn't want the paper to warp, so I used good old glue stick for the larger pieces. The next task is submit scans, so Yellow, would you please approach the medbay scanner? Vote Yellow, their scan showed a single bone. As we all know, the x-ray should have shown oven-baked super sculpy clay. A murder in electrical wouldn't be complete without an imposter and an unlucky crewmate. For that, I'm using gray super sculpy. Thanks, Red. Let's start with making the skeleton for the imposter. Step 1, save your foil scrap after you bake your Tostino's pizza rolls and form it into an armature with a gaping maw. Then use one of these dollar store decorative beads as the helmet visor of the assimilated alien. Using flattened clay that's about 1/8 of an inch thick, form the flesh all over the body. I beefed out the visor and the mouth using clay snakes and blending it in. Then stab in a couple wired chicken legs, then perform leg day until those quads and hammies are stacked. This is worse without teeth. Off camera, I rolled out and baked these grayscale mouse poops, which will make a fine set of teeth. I also made this little twisty, face-piercing tongue to sit inside its large gob. Since I pre-baked the teeth, I was able to stab them easily into these gummy root canals without them squishing up on me. And lastly, before baking, I melted away all my fingerprint evidence using isopropyl alcohol. Okay, time to make a crewmate. First, make a foil bean, and then decapitate the bean, because we only need half of it. Then give the half bean a couple loungy legs. I'm going for a slumped sitting position because I really want to show off its big bone later. Then we're going to smother clay flesh all over this supple nugget. To add a bunch of fabric folds, I used tiny clay snakes and blended them around the areas where you might expect fabric to be bunched up. And just because I thought it would be cute, I added some treads to their little booties. To sculpt a bone, make a smooth shaft and 2 balls, then blend it together until you're done making pee-pee jokes. Throw the bone into the bone zone, and then add some lacerations all around it. Off camera, I baked my children according to the instructions on the box, and oh yeah, I decided to sculpt a few crewmates as well, along with a couple branded accessories. Before painting, I masked out the glass visor with poster tack to block any overspray from the airbrush in the next step. I primed in white, then used dark brown on the underside for shading as sort of a zenithal highlight. The imposter is literally anyone, but I'm basic and I went with red this time. Sorry Red, red sus. I decided to paint the teeth white even though they have no right being this clean. Don't forget those hard to reach spots in the back. Later I'll hit them up with a grimy brown wash to make them more murder appropriate. And now back to the halfling. I'm doing the same brown zenithal highlight, then base coating in yellow, the color of joy and happiness, a feeling this crewmate knows well because of the sweet release of death. And don't forget the booties because it's cold out there. Hey, is that a bone in your pocket or you just... And then a little bit of red for the open wound. Now some people say using Citadel washes is a cheat code, and they're pretty much right. This nectar just seems to always fall in all the right places. I'm using a Reichland flesh shade for almost everything on both of these figures, except for the body of the imposter. Red was a little too dark, so I'm using a Nuln oil for this bod. I think the homemade wash from earlier would have been fine too, but I just wasn't brave enough for experimenting right now. Oh boy, here we go.
Success!
And for the final color, this was a fresh kill, so I'm dabbing on a little clear glossy red in select spots on the killer and the killee. I didn't want it to be super gory, but I did want this halfling to look like fresh meat. Looks like meat's back on our menu, boys. And here's the finished figures, plus these 3 content creators whom have provided me hours of Among Us entertainment and stolen my heart.
Now all of
YouTube
knows you're
a simp.
And for the final task, Red, would you please throw all this trash away, please? Nope, you got. We don't throw away trash in this house. There's still plenty of meat on these bones for future crafting.
I'm the trash man.
Okay everyone, this is a little bit confusing, but... Oh, you're all ghosts. Maybe I'm the imposter.
What have I done?
Well, guess I'm dead. But before I show you all the beauty shots, here's a shout out to all the new patron crewmates that have joined the ship recently. Shout out to Kale Bean, Nate's Minifigs, check out my Instagram, I think you'll like it, Zonk's Illustration, Echo Rome, Koa McKelligot, Michael F. McCarroll, Justin Jacobs, Freddie Fro, and Ellen Yu. Many thanks to all these patrons, new and old. If you want to crew up with me, head on over to patreon.com/StudsonStudio where you can get a shout out, see your name in the credits, get project sneak peeks, join our Discord, and more. Thank you, patrons. That'll do it for this episode. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.